So apparently I'm to talk about the meaning of integration. That's good to be reminded. So very, very simply put, the meaning of integration is that we're trying to move from divided awareness to undivided awareness. Yeah? That's really what Bhante Rangarajita, who used that language, means, that we're moving from divided awareness to undivided awareness, yeah? Or divided attention to undivided attention. That's the whole of Buddhism in a nutshell, yeah? Is to move from divided awareness to undivided awareness. And that's why I want to try and give you a bit of a glimpse of tonight. As so often with Buddhism, it sounds very simple, but it's very, very profound as you get into what all of that means. Yeah? So let's give you a sort of a map for where I want to go this evening. I worked all this out in the shower this morning. So at least I've had a shower. Hygiene's up there. Anyway, so you could simply say there's three levels of divided awareness. Yeah? And they're increasing depth and profundity. So the first level of divided awareness is simply at the level of our everyday psychology. Although it's weird, we use this language of psychology. I increasingly don't like to use the language because either people think it's a subject that they want to get into, or some people think it's a subject they want to get away from. And I've been both at different times in my life. All that psychology means just your everyday state of mind, your everyday person, the person you think you are, and how you kind of work in the world. Broadly speaking, is your psychology, your everyday mind, yeah. And in that level, we're divided. We're divided in all sorts of ways, which I'll come into in a minute. Then we're divided in a deeper way, as it were, vertically. So if you think that we're divided sort of horizontally, we're divided against ourselves, we have different, even extremely different impulses and drives and so on. Many of them are divided and even in competition with each other within ourselves, if you see what I mean. But I'll say more about that in a minute. So if you imagine that, it's sort of on the horizontal level of our everyday mind, or the mind that we go to work with, have relationships with, eat in Brixton Village with. That's our everyday mind, yeah. Which we sort of call psychology, but for some weird reason I've taken against the term. Then you've got this other level of division, which is sort of more vertical. It's to do with the division between your so-called conscious mind and your unconscious mind. I'm not massively keen on those terms either. What is my problem with words? But the problem with the word, there's no word in Buddhism that means unconscious. And I think that the word unconscious has become kind of weirdly rarefied. People talk about their unconscious like it's a box they have somewhere. They can't find it. There's something horrible in it, but they can't open it. I said, no, but it's not actually like that. All it just means, unconscious, is that psyche is not a horizontal matter. It exists at all kinds of depths. Some of them startle you to be so unlike you. A friend of mine was just saying how he had a dream where he matched with his brother on Hinge. It's a bit startling, especially if you're straight. It's those sort of things that Freud and Jung and all those people were interested in, is that psyche itself has depth. It's not just what you're sort of conscious of. I think the Buddhist vision is more that consciousness is a bit like a torch light that you can shine on something, and things go in more and more into the dark, don't they? And you can move the torchlight around. So what in the West we've called unconscious just means all of those things that aren't in the torchlight. And some of those things we are divided from, even so divided from that we wouldn't recognise them as anything to do with me or us. Yeah. And the instinct then is to just sort of brush that away and just think, well, that's just not me. Yeah? You can see what people, a genius like Freud and Jung were trying to get to is all those kind of, as it were, unconscious motivations. Unfortunately, the language gets reified and therefore sort of trivialized. But we don't know who's driving this creature, do we? I don't mean me. I mean me, actually. But I also mean you. Like I was doing the meditation challenge at the LBC on Saturday. I wasn't in the best of moods, to be frank. And it was, I was just thinking, who is driving this, I kept thinking, why am I waving my hands around so much? Anyone with any awareness has this sort of spooky sense of who's in charge here. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? That's so weird, and anyway, that's that. So we're divided horizontally, and I want to try and look at that in the first half of it. Then we're divided vertically in sense of divided between what we're conscious of, or at least conscious of sometimes, and what we're unconscious of or less conscious of, to the point where it feels like it's actually separate to us. What's important to remember of that, which is a corrective to the Western tradition, is a lot of what we're unconscious of is highly positive and is actually more frightening than the negative things that you think you're unconscious of. One of the things that we haven't quite grasped, I think, is that a lot of the things that we are divided from are our own potential, which is much, much greater than we realise, and that's a bit frightening. Because when you touch your potential, you have this really weird sense that I could actually be living up to that much, much more. It's much more like me. I've had experiences of my own potential where I think that actually is more like me, and it's much braver, much more, much kinder, much wiser, much more committed than I am. And actually, I could be that person much more. It's a challenge when you start to experience your potential, but it's infinitely positive. We tend to think of things that are unconscious as being negative. I think some of them are, if we want to use that language of negative. Actually, it's all energy, and you need it all. Yeah? So we're divided horizontally, and we're divided vertically. But that's still not enough. The greatest division is much, much deeper than that. If you think of this horizontal matter of our mind, our day-to-day mind, our everyday consciousness, then you think of this mind that, as it were, sits below that, which is really to do with the mind of myth and story and narrative. Human beings are primarily, I think, mythic creatures. We understand myth and story and legend and parable. That's why religions have been so important in human development, is because all of them speak in the language of myth. Human beings are designed for myth. We understand through metaphor. I don't think we're awfully good at abstractions. At least I was just talking about myself about rubbish at abstractions. Anything to do with facts, I get very blurry about. I'm good on atmosphere. But we're not. It's this idea that we sort of abstract philosophizing people is very weird and modern and very thin. Mostly we're motivated by stories, deep stories. Stories about ourselves, stories about the world, stories we picked up from our parents, stories we've inherited from the culture around us. They're hugely motivating, often without our awareness. Yeah? I'll try and say a bit more about that later on, but I don't want to go on about it too much. But at the deepest level, we're divided in the deepest sense, aren't we? We're divided between me and you. Yeah? Between my sense of myself and the world. Yeah? That is our deepest division. It's such a deep division that we assume it is reality, that self and world are actually divided. And, there's clearly something in it, because I'm the only one in this room who can wiggle my toes, thus. So I can't wiggle anybody else's toes in the whole universe, but I can wiggle mine. So there must be something in this division thing. I'm the only object in the universe that knows itself from the inside, and so are you. That's why meditation is so important, because of all the objects in the universe, and human beings are objects like any other object. It's the only object you know from the inside is yourself, which is pretty startling when you think of it. from stars to planets to the dog. You're the only object in the universe that you have interior sense of. So if you're going to get to the truth, the sense of interiority and of knowing oneself inside in a way that you don't know anything else is going to be absolutely crucial, isn't it? But the fundamental division is between me and world. And sometimes that division is kind of agonizing, because it's become not only a division, but an alienation, and not only an alienation, but a terrible threat. So when I was on I did a month-long solitary in summer in the Spanish mountains, and a month for me is a sort of fairly long time to be on my own because I'm an extroverted creature. And I remember walking down the path on my little daily walk, and I don't know whether you've had these moments, particularly when you're in very, it's quite isolated mountain city. I didn't see anyone pretty much for a month. You suddenly have this sense that if I dropped down dead here, I mean, all that would happen is the goats would come and eat me, and like I said, I said to the guys who live in the community down the way, I said, well, if I scream, do come. They said, we won't be able to hear you scream. It's like, it's like Alien. Headspace is where they can't hear you scream or something. So I suddenly had this sort of moment where you think, if I drop down, nothing cares about me. It's very beautiful there, but sort of nothing cares about me. And then I was thinking, well, how do I know? That is what seems like a direct experience. Here I am standing in this valley with these mountains, and I'm thinking none of that cares for me, and I'm separate from it. Do you see what I mean? And not just distinct for reasonable reasons, so that I can eat and move around and things like that. That's why we have this sense of self, so I can eat and procreate. I wouldn't be doing that, obviously, but so I can eat and get shelter and all that, so for evolutionary reasons. Instead of that, we've got to the point of I'm like a toy in a box. All that one day the toy will break and the box will carry on exactly the same, and it doesn't care about the toy. That is our modern situation, that we've divided ourselves from the world, and that has all these consequences. For instance, it means that we can frack the world. It means that we can pollute the world. It means that we can use it for our own ends because we're completely divided from it. So damaging the world has no impact on me at all. Has all sorts of practical consequences, this belief that we are separate from the world, that we're divided, and that division is actually true. It makes death, for instance, terrifying, because all that will happen at death is that I get snuffed out and everything goes on quite happily without me. Buddhism is saying, well, it's actually not like that. So in the second half, I'll try and say more about that, but Buddhism is saying it's just not like that. What we've got is a modern materialist or physicalist view that thinks that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain, consciousness is locked inside my brain, I am completely separate from you, completely separate from the world, divided to the nth degree, and when I die, it doesn't really matter, what would it be like if you looked around and what one saw instead of dead matter on the other side of this vast, unbridgeable divide between me and the world? What if we saw a kind of consciousness that we're part of? What would that do to our sense of walking down that path or moving towards death, if we felt that what we had around us was not dead matter but consciousness? Anyway, those are the three areas I want to try and go into. It's all a bit highfalutin on a cold Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Yes, it is Wednesday. But I want to start first of all with this sense of divided within ourselves at the level of everyday experience. I want to make sure we meditate again in a moment, so I won't say too much. But perhaps another general point to make is all of us are more or less divided. At this deepest level, we're all divided, unless you're a Buddha. If you haven't got that deepest division, you're either worryingly alienated or you're a Buddha. Hands up. But then after that, it's always a question of more or less divided, yeah? So at this simple horizontal level, you do meet people who are terribly, terribly divided, don't you? You know, like, people can be very different at work than they are at home. They can be very different with their loved ones than they are with their friends. I have a friend of mine, no names, who's got quite a bad temper, and you'd never know it most of the time. He's sweet as a nut. In fact, I have to remind him, so you've just talked about what a lovely week you've had, but what about that thing that happened then? It's like it didn't happen. He says, oh yeah, no, yeah. You know, he's like very strikingly divided from it. Have you met people like that? You know, they're very divided from aspects of themselves, and will even just say, oh yeah, no, that's not a big deal. You know, some people aren't so divided, and just, do I want to go there? Probably not, just now. Anyway, I'm a bit in a metaphysical mode at the moment. I have to be careful with myself, I'll go running off. So the first thing we're trying to do is go from divided awareness, divided at this simple sense of having different pulls and instincts, into being undivided or integrated, to use Bante's language, or whole, yeah? Meditation is the whole person wholly attending, is a classic description of it. If you are to go deeper in life, what deeper in life means is less divided at every level, yeah? So the reason why you think at times you can't meditate is because you're very divided. And you can make those divisions worse in the meditation by reacting to them, for instance. Because part of you come here on a Wednesday night, you do want to meditate. Weirdly, once you start meditating, you're thinking, actually, I'd rather watch Netflix. You know, you're divided in that simple sense. I want to do this goodly thing, and I kind of don't. And if you're not careful, instead of moving towards an undivided awareness, we just don't do either very well. We come to meditate and don't really quite do it because we're slightly divided about whether we want to. You must have had this experience. I sort of think it's a good idea. I think it's, there's even scientific research, which everyone goes weak at the knees at scientific research. You know. So it's a good idea to be here. Oh my God, look at me! I'm not in the pub. I'm at a Buddhist centre. That's like so me. And that's such a good look for me. You see, I'm up with contemporary lingo. You know, so you've got this division. You kind of want to be here, you don't want to be here. You think it's a good idea to be here, you'd rather be somewhere cuddlier, you know, whatever it is, you know. And if you're not careful, you, instead of trying to work with that, you just go, whatever. And you just sort of be here and sort of meditate and sort of don't. What that will do is mean that your meditations won't go very deep, and then you'll be right to feel ambivalent about meditation because it doesn't do much. The reason it doesn't do much is because you haven't given it very much. Yeah? And that can become a picture of people's lives, that you never really quite want to do this, you're a bit divided about it, don't quite give it your energy, so you never really do it that much, so you're right to be divided about it. Do you see what I mean? You get this sort of circular thing going on. So the first thing to do in meditation, and in life generally, is to not divide anymore. So when I started meditating, I used to cycle from my squat in Brixton, just near Loughborough Junction. I used to cycle from my squat over there, get to the LBC. I was always a bit late. I'm glad to see some people are still carrying on that tradition. And I used to almost do a forward roll into the shrine room. Think, here we go, meditation, really important, and immediately I'd fall asleep. And then I'd get really frustrated with that, and then really try and force myself, and that would make falling asleep worse. So what I did there was I increased the division. I did want to be there, I did actually value it. I was also massively out of kilter, and was really tired, but instead of working with that, I just tried to ignore it or force myself to meditate, which made me more tired. Yeah? As soon as you make divisions worse, you strengthen both parties. You you create an argument in yourself. You can see this is also a mirror of what we're doing in society. We're creating, if we're not careful, more and more divisions between black and white, gay and straight, cisgender, transgender, and so on. If we're not careful, we'll just create more and more divisions, and that will be in no one's interests. Yeah. So we can't heal divisions at the larger level until we can heal divisions at our own personal level. Yeah, we need to start noticing our divided impulses and try and get everybody on board with this meditation. Yeah. Now, it's too difficult to teach how to do that, and I'm hoping in this challenge that you get more of a sense of this. But you're trying to, let's just watch the breath just now in a moment. You're trying to watch the breath, but you're trying to do that in such a way as to bring more and more of your attention to that. What tends to happen is people try to watch the breath, because that's a goodly spiritual thing to do, and that's like so me, to do that. But they don't really want to do it. They want to think about what they're going to, that hot date they've got at the end of tonight. Anybody? No? Actually. Or they want to think about, oh God, I've got this awful exam tomorrow, whatever. And what you easily happens is you just snap your attention between one and the other. You try and do the goodly thing and watch your breath. You're actually not that interested in it, so your mind just wanders off and goes on to something you are interested in. Then you tell yourself off for doing that, and you go back to the breath, which you're not very interested in, so you then go back off, and then it just doesn't get anywhere. Yeah? So the first thing is to learn is to not to do that thing, not to just keep on snapping your attention onto something you think you should do, and get away from something you shouldn't do. What you try to do is your mind goes off, and you try to open up to where your mind has gone off. You don't go back to the breath. You open up to where your mind's gone off, and you feel what is happening. Is it because I'm anxious? Is it because I want something? Is it because I'm a bit bored? What does that feel like? By doing that, you're actually bringing more of yourself to the meditation. Then whilst you're doing that, in touch with, okay, how do I now feel in the body now I've been thinking about nonsense? Can I then just remember that I'm also breathing? Yeah. So you're trying to get away from this, snapping your attention from the breath, while you're just letting your attention flop over to what you want to think about. Your mind isn't stupid, it just wants to try and think of something that's more interesting than watching the breath. So just notice that and take an interest in what's going on. See if you can feel that in the body, rather than tell yourself, I need to do this mindfulness of breathing thing. Then see if you can include the breath in that feeling. Yeah. So if you're anxious or bored, because I've just been talking a bit too long, you can just see if you can feel that, and then remember you're breathing as well, so you can just feel that. Don't need to make a big deal of breathing. You just need to bring it back in a bit, rather than switch over to it. So it's like, here's your breath, and you go into this much broader context, and you try to pull the breath out of that context. In that context, not sort of transfer back to the breath again. So that's a very simple starter kit for being undivided at this level of ordinary mind. Yeah. So do you see that the whole of Buddhism is this question of moving from divided awareness to undivided awareness? Yeah. And you can see that you can start that immediately. At the very least, you're trying not to create more divisions and to polarize within yourself, if you see what I mean. That's quite a difficult thing to learn to do. You're trying to get your whole self to be going in the same direction, or at least approximately. You can't quite ever do it the same. An image from the Buddhist tradition is that you're trying to be like a good sheepdog. I don't know whether this is helpful for you. But a good sheepdog, they round up all the sheep, stop them running off in all directions and jumping over cliffs and so on, and they get them to go, in the right direction, but they don't dragoon them into a line. The flock move around as they keep on gathering them up. Yeah. So it's a very good image for meditation. You're trying to, when your mind goes off, you don't just ignore it or, I don't know, whatever you might do. You sort of round it up. You keep rounding yourself up. And to do that, you need quite a lot of self-awareness and skill. And non-reactivity to your experience, even a bit of luck, even sometimes a bit of magic. But you're trying to sort of, like a good sheepdog, not frighten all the sheep, not bite them all, but not just let them do what they like either, just kind of round them up to go in the right direction. And that's a life's work, yeah? You can see that it's a brilliant image for what we're trying to do. And in that direction, from Buddha's point of view, is going towards enlightenment or going towards, transcendental value. Personally, I think that's what we're here to do, is to be a good sheepdog. And then hopefully we can be of some use in the world, if we could do that. But then, so that's at that level. Then you have this question of being divided from so-called the unconscious, or at least drives and instincts and myths, as it were, that you're divided from, that you're not very conscious of. I'm not sure what you can do about it, or I can do about it. The most practical thing, as I said before, really, is just that you stop. You stop getting stuck at the level of horizontal divisions, and the divided life that we're being sold more and more, where you go from YouTube to WhatsApp to TikTok to etc., etc. Life is more and more like Netflix, isn't it? Where you binge watch one moment and then get bored the next, and then when you go onto Netflix, it all just looks so boring in some ways. It's sort of like they're all pretty much the same, but they all look in slightly different packages. So you're trying to. The first thing to do to start to open up to deeper matters is to stop getting involved at that level. We're sort of addicted to that level of ourselves, and then think that that's me. I'm that person who watches these things, who's into that sort of thing. This is my identity, and so on. We get stuck at that level, which is a shame because there's just so much more to us than that level. So that's one of the reasons why the retreat is so important. Is that it's a container in which to stop and allow things to come up. Often, for instance, what happens on retreats is you have stronger dreams, which is so many people who go on retreat, they say, "Oh, my dream life went crazy," I remember my first solitary retreat. I was more awake when I was dreaming. I had these incredible sort of dreams. I don't sort of remember my dreams very much, but one of the things that people experience a lot more once you stop living at that very horizontal level that we're all sort of stuck to, like a fly paper, is your dream life starts to open up. And you can see that there's all these other levels of yourself trying to get some purchase on you, Of course, one of the ways we try to open up to that level is by doing a sort of raid on it, by using drugs and recreational drugs and so on, which is a sort of raid on that level, because you feel the absence of those deeper levels. And, the obvious thing to do is just to smash away in with a drug. Problem with that, it just closes up straight away afterwards. I mean, there are much other problems with drugs as well, but hey, I'm not here to tell you that. I'm sure you kind of know them, actually. We're all innocents of driven, aren't we? So that approach to these more unconscious drives doesn't really work. At least I don't believe it does. I've never seen people really psychically benefit from it. I think it can give you a glimpse of something. It did for me, even a very important glimpse, but I wasn't able to sort of integrate that glimpse. It was just like a signpost. I've never yet met anybody that I thought was actually deeper for doing it. They might have had fun, but they didn't seem deeper to me. And that, as you get older, depth is all you've got, I'm afraid. If you haven't got there yet, get a grip with that thought, because you lose everything else. It's painful. You lose your charm and your looks. I mean, of course, I haven't. But and then if you haven't got any depth, you ain't got much. I can tell you. Anyway, so drugs won't do that for you. The drugs don't work, as we say. So yeah, your first thing is just to stop. It's quite uncomfortable sometimes to stop. You need to sort of be uncomfortable and not worry about that. The trouble is, discomfort is so difficult to stay with now because we're only a click away from a sort of a sort of ersatz comfort. And then the other two areas that I've experienced, the so-called sort of felt less divided from the unconscious, is friendship and in artistic experience. The two things I've most experienced that. I think on an everyday level, it's often friends that point out to you what you're not seeing about yourself. Because this language of unconscious is, as I say, reified. To reify something means to make a thing of it. As soon as you made a thing of it, you then think, where is it? Have I got it? What's in it? You get into problems as soon as you reify. What one means is, I don't really know who's working this thing. I don't really know who I am. I think actually you don't, and I don't, and gradually you try not to, that's kind of fine. That's kind of fine. But when you're divided, it doesn't feel fine. So I think it's often friends that point out to you what you can't see about yourself. All of us have got blind spots by definition, and you, by definition, can't see them. So you need someone else who says, you're just doing that thing that you do. One of the things we're trying to create here at the Brixton Buddhist Centre and at the London Buddhist Centre, where I come from, is what's called a Sangha of friends, where you can be honest with each other about yourself and about how you experience the other person. Not in a kind of offloading kind of way, but where you can actually say, why do you always need to tell that story? Why is that actually true? I've never been quite, where you give permission to each other to have something more like genuine communication rather than social chit-chat. But for me, that's been one of the ways in which I've been confronted with elements of myself which I am divided from. I think friendship is, I don't really think there's any such thing of Buddhism without friendship, really. It's just that friendship in modern life has been so trivialized. And then the other area that I've experienced most is in art, in the arts, really. Reading, writing, not writing so much, but reading at least, and film and theatre and opera and all that sort of thing. Sometimes I've had experiences, again, if we use this level of unconscious, it does sound like it's negative. All of my experiences of the eruption of unconscious, as it were, material into my life has been highly positive and threatening, but highly positive. I've told this story lots of times before, but I went to see Wagner's the Meistersingers, which I didn't know. I went with Jan Vosch, I didn't know it. I'm a big fan of Wagner, but I didn't know the opera. And the first act I thought was just rubbish. I thought, this is ridiculous. When you go to opera, you think, they're just screaming about stuff. Like, what is the big deal? Why is everyone so upset about everything? Everyone just needs to calm down. Anyway, and I just thought it was ridiculous. And then I got to, I think, the third act, and the music of the third act starts in this complete, it was like I got into a lift and it just suddenly went down 6 floors. I was suddenly in this deeper, darker place. It's fantastic. I would never have known it was possible. Because literally before I think, this is so ridiculous, I can't believe I've come. How much was it, And then it was like getting into a lift and going down 6 floors. And then they sang, there's a famous quintet in it. And I just went out of this world. I just sort of disappeared. And then wept and wept and wept, which I often do when I have these experiences. I sit and crying. And it's like this incredible sense of coming back into contact with something that you'd been divided from and that you'd got lost from. So like unbearable sense of how did I forget this? This is much more important than anything I get involved in. I've got terribly lost from it. I got divided from it. Sometimes people have this experience in the natural world where you just feel this painful sense, joyous but painful sense, that I've been divided from something. I've lost my way from something that is ultimately significant. And you can't really rationalize it because it's coming up from the depths, as it were. I don't think it's our business to try and integrate it even. it's more our business to try to open up to it more and more, and live in communion with it more and more, if you see what I mean, rather than try and think, what does it mean? Which is sort of so trivial. But to sort of live in that world, a kind of mythic world, much more. Again, you get a sense of this at best on retreat, where everything starts to feel significant in a way that's quite difficult to put into words. For me, I want more and more of that in my life, more and more of a sense of something below the stuff I think I know, something below the sorts of stuff I can say that illuminates in my life and gives it a kind of gravity. But you see how we're divided from it, and when you contact it in any moment, and it can be in the most weird ways, the most surprising ways, the most unlikely ways, you feel this incredible sense of relief for being in contact with something that you'd been divided from. It's like that you'd been divided from yourself, but yourself is the music, or yourself is the landscape, or yourself is the simple experience that I often find is cinema, actually. That moment at the end of the film. It's awful on Netflix, isn't it? You have to now press a button that says, no, I don't want to go on to the next stupid film. Leave me alone. You just want to sit there, don't you? You don't want to have to press any buttons. You just want to sit there. As the credits go, you're in this kind of new space. And Netflix immediately says, "Oh, if you like this, you'll like that." Whilst you're here. In cinema, luckily they haven't got that click button yet. What you want is just to sit there in that darkness, don't you, with the credits rolling. You don't even know what you're doing, but you definitely want to be there. And you do not want your friend to start nattering about, oh my God, wasn't that good? Did you don't want any of that. You just want to sit there. Some of the best experiences we have, I think, where we're most in touch with that is at the end of a really good film. Nowadays, there's a lot of good films, aren't there? Anyway, there we go. I won't do any more film ads. And then finally, there's much deeper matter, much more. Much deeper matter of being divided from creating this division in life between self and world, which I'm still trying to get my head around, because there's no way of talking about, because we've got this idea of self and world, so we then think, okay, it's not divided. But that's not strictly true, because if we're not divided, then why is there suffering? And if we're not divided, how come I actually can't read your mind? I can probably read it more than I realise, and probably you can as well. But there is something in division that is true, obviously, but there's also something that's not true. Buddhism seems to be trying to point us to a non-divided consciousness in which being divided or not isn't a problem. Or rather, there's a consciousness in which the distinction between being divided and being non-divided is no longer there, if you see what I mean. And all of Buddhism is teaching this, that we have created a division in life at the deepest level between me and the world, yeah? And that division that we've created is our primary cause of suffering. Because then if I've divided myself from you, and if I divide myself from the world, that means I need to protect myself against threats from the world, and it means I need to grab things from the world that can embellish myself. Yeah? So we're in this constant state of activity of trying to keep that division going. This is one of the reasons, I think, why sex is so important to us. Well, it was. But hey, getting on. It's because somehow we intuit that sense of the division between self and world as being a construct, and the instinct is to merge it, to merge self and other, merge self and world. And you actually can't do that, but that's one of the reasons why it's so compelling. I mean, there are other reasons as well, but that's one of the reasons why it's so compelling. That we feel somewhere that this division that we create between self and world is a cause of pain. And any deeper experience, that division seems to soften. Yeah. I'm writing another book at the moment with Yana Archer, and I've been going back to the story of the Buddha before his enlightenment, where he remembered himself as an 8-year-old boy watching his father plough and getting into this state of a very, very natural state of absorption. He wasn't meditating. He was an 8-year-old boy. He was sitting under a tree. He just effortlessly becomes utterly absorbed. Interestingly, he had his eyes open. In some forms of meditation, you meditate with your eyes open. And in the parable about it, the shadow of the tree that he sits under doesn't move, which is a marvellous metaphor for when you're really absorbed, time seems to disappear. Time gets really, really strong to the degree to which you're not absorbed. As soon as you're absorbed, time softens very, very quickly, doesn't it? But as soon as you're not absorbed, time becomes very, very strong for you. Like on this month's retreat, I kept on reminding myself, okay, so I'm thinking about, okay, I'm here next month, next Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday, and then the following, all that sort of thing. That just means I'm not really absorbed now. If I just get absorbed, it's like we've got leftover energy all the time because we're not really absorbed in things. So we start getting fixated on time. And of course, we're more and more fixated on time now. Yeah. Why was I talking about that? I can't remember. I'm distracting myself. We try to merge subject and object. We feel the tension between them. And Buddhism is always saying that division is a construction. It's not a construction that you've it's not that you didn't learn that construction in this life. Traditionally, you've been living on that basis for many, many lifetimes previously. But Buddhism is very clear throughout its 2,500-year tradition that it is a construction. It's not actually there. This idea that self and world is divided is not actually there. You can't actually say what is there, because as soon as you try to say what is there, like if you say it's one mind, for instance, which is one way that people have tried to put it, that actually gets into problems immediately because, again, why is there suffering? If there's just one mind, then human beings do terrible, terrible things, historically and in the present moment, literally, just down the road, in the most local war zone, human beings are doing unbearably dreadful things to each other. So it's not right. It's not that there is just somehow weirdly one blissful mind that unifies us all. You can't adequately talk about what happens when you cross that division. But the experience, as you move in that direction, is that the distinction between self and world softens. So that's why I was talking. I know I get that. That's why I was talking about the Buddha's experience, because this shadow never moves. And that's a brilliant example of time disappearing. But it's also a beautiful example of how, when you get absorbed, the hard and fast distinction between myself and the world seems to melt a bit. You start to feel that the world is slightly more magical, that it's working with you or even in dialogue with you. You can experience this quite directly on retreats, where self and world seem to interact in a new kind of way. It's not a sort of silly way where everyone rushes out and hugs a tree, but you sort of feel more and more that the world around you is alive and sort of communicating with you, and that can become a very, very deep experience. Yeah. So whatever happens, I don't know what happens once you get across this great deepest divide between self and world. But a new kind of, Buddhism also says that a new kind of consciousness arises, which is beyond division and beyond sameness somehow, in which both things appear at the same time, but can cooperate in some way that we can't imagine. So what we can do just now, in a moment to meditate, to finish with, is something I've been doing, trying to suggest people do at the LBC, is that we, and I've been doing it in my own meditations, is that we, and remember this is just an imaginative exercise because I don't know what it's like on the other side of the divide, and you can't know, actually. It's outside of language and so on. But it would be more like that as I let go of my end of the division, as it were, you'd experience yourself as opening up into a greater consciousness that somehow goes beyond me and beyond the world. So what I do in my meditation is I sit there and just imagine that I'm in a world that is not, because it's weird, our contemporary vision is really dreadful. We really think that I exist literally to the perimeter of my body, and everything else isn't me. It's a terrible thing that we've done there. That nothing else is me, and that even everything else, possibly apart from other people and their brains, everything else is dead. And that only I am alive, only brains are alive. Perhaps, if you're generous, for animals and so on. But before you know it, you've got a completely dead world. I mean, human beings have never had that vision until very, very recently. It's a weird modern idea. It's very, very unusual. Historically, it's never been heard. And it's not doing us a lot of good. So what I think we'll do to finish is just sit and just imagine that you're in a world not of material but of consciousness, and that all of that consciousness is available to you because you're non-divided.